This is the first podcast.
Oh my God.
Let's see how this goes. Why don't you come in a little closer to me? Just
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Now we're all nice and cozy.
Look at that.
All right. I know, the nervous. What to do with your hands?
I know. Feeling good.
Yeah. Do you ever watch that guy on TV? Like there's TV anymore. He goes up to girls and sings. He's a guitar player. He goes up to these girls randomly and just sits next to them, kind of play you a song.
No.
And inevitably, about 30 seconds in, they start doing this with their hair because they don't know what to do with their hands. They get nervous.
Yeah.
And it's a girl thing, I think.
I've noticed that.
Try not to be genderist, but I find that's
You're
what
being
we're
a little genderist.
Yeah, I guess I am. Anyway, so this is the very first podcast. And the reason I wanted to interview you for the first one is we always have really interesting conversations.
Yeah.
And they always go off into these really interesting tangents about life and what we're doing and why we're here and what we want and stuff. And your topic of study in college that you're getting your master's right now,
Yeah.
going for a PhD,
Yeah.
is what's the topic again?
Space and time cognition and evolutionary and cognitive psychology more broadly.
Got it. Right.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So starting from like the broadest, evolutionary and cognitive psychology is just the study of cognition and how the mind works, but from an evolutionary standpoint. Like, because we're the product of like genes being passed on generation to generation to generation. So we have remnants of cognition from our ancestors, and how those things sort of carried over and like what they look like and how they influence the way our mind was built. And then space and time is looking at just basically like generally, how does the brain process the physical space around us and time, like as it passes? Because everything that we process and everything that we do has to take place at some given place at some given point in time. And the way that we process the space and time is going to be dependent on our evolutionary past.
Well, do you think that some people experience space and time differently? Like a race car driver, a hockey player, a baseball player, like they do things in with such a reaction time that I can't do probably.
Yeah. So everyone has individual differences in how they process space and time. So like you and me, even not even just like me and a race car driver, me and someone wildly different from like who I am as a person, everyone's going to experience space and time a little bit differently. And those are actually predictive of different careers that you take. So people who are better at processing space tend to go into like STEM careers. People who are better at processing time are good for those like really fast, high intensity sports like race car driving or baseball, because that being able to keep up with everything that's happening around you in space requires super precise timing and like how you as an individual can keep up with those things.
And is that genetic?
Yeah.
So it's predictive then. In theory, if your parents have a proclivity to something, you could potentially have that same thing too. Yeah,
it's a mixture of genetic and environmental factors. Genetics usually statistically accounts for like 60% of the differences, and like the other 40% has to do with the environment and different influences coming at you. So like definitely like you will inherit space and time abilities from your parents.
That's pretty cool. What's your take on epigenetics? Is that like a real science? Is that a thing?
Yeah. It's not my area, so I don't know a ton about it.
Well, that's weird. Okay, sorry.
No problem. So yeah, it's not my area, but I know because epigenetics has to do with so anytime you do anything, like when you learn is like the most well-known example of this, your brain will physically change.
Right.
So that can also go all the way down to like the level of genetics. So like the things that you do will change the way that genes are expressed, and different ways that they bind and are formed and the way that your brain produces them. So you can inherit those changes from your parents. I'm not exactly sure how big the changes can be, or like what, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. So
Yeah.
here, this is interesting. And I've thought a lot about this. So the study I remember reading about or hearing about was they took mice or rats in a maze and they had their favorite food at the end.
Mhm.
And they would train the mice to go get their favorite food.
Yeah.
Then they put like a shock plate in front of the food. And eventually the mice realized that even though it was their favorite food, if they got close, they get shocked.
Mhm.
Well, those mice then had offspring, and the offspring knew not to touch the shock plate.
Yeah.
So, and the way I understand it is, it is a protein in the brain that will fire, causing the neural synapse and causing the reaction, and that they inherit the protein.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me about that is, we look at, from my perspective, so I'm Jewish, and, parts of my family died in the Holocaust. And as a child growing up, that was always a very relevant thing. But it didn't happen to me, and it didn't happen to my parents. My grandparents' family members it happened to. And so, but I feel like it happened to me.
Yeah.
Like I have this inherited feeling that I can't explain,
Right.
that's there. And when I react to certain forms of, things you see in the news, other genocides, prejudice, I have this real strong visceral reaction. Now, maybe my parents would have had a stronger one, and my grandparents even stronger,
Mhm.
and it's maybe watered down over the years, but I get, like, that's my experience. But then you think about, people talk about other minority groups that have been completely abused in some way, shape, or form, Native Americans, African Americans, et cetera. And you go, well, how, it's America now, and it's hundreds of years later, why aren't they, dealing with life the way everybody else does? And I think it's part of the epigenetics. I think it's the inherited that, we've been beaten down, all these bad things have happened. And this isn't everybody, but there's a big percentage that,
Mhm.
Haven't maybe moved forward evolutionarily as much as they could have, because that was holding them back.
Right.
And it wasn't like it's a choice, like, oh, I have this thing, but I'm going to push through. It's there, like how they think, how they react, how,
Mhm.
and I get that. And I don't think people take that into account
Right.
when they talk about, oh, well, we've made so much progress. Well, we may have made progress regarding the laws in the country,
Mhm.
but the people who are on the other end of those laws may not have evolutionarily progressed to the point where they can fully take advantage in some
Right.
ways. Does that make sense? Or am
It
I just
does.
talking out of my butt?
No, it completely makes sense. Yeah, I'm not like super familiar with that area of research, but like definitely that.
Makes some sense though?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does. It does.
Sometimes I say things and it sounds really good,
Yeah.
but it's totally made up Brianism. I don't think that was a Brianism though. I think that there's something there.
No, that's actually, it sounds like a good example of the relationship between society and the individuals living within it, and how like society is actually just emergent from the individuals living in it, not like kind of a top-down thing.
Mhm.
So that makes sense why
Almost like an inside out thing.
yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at society. Now, what is it about this topic matter that you want to get all this education in and spend all this time studying it? Like, what are you hoping to learn? Like, what draws you to it, I guess?
It's such a huge, interesting, broad area of fascinating research that I don't know, I just want to learn everything about it.
But it's fascinating to you. I mean, to
Yeah,
me, I'm like,
yeah.
oh, that's interesting,
Yeah,
but what is it like? What grabs you?
it's just so related to everything. Like the way that your entire brain works sort of is dependent on how well and like how well you take in space and time. So it's just like research is showing that it's just related to absolutely everything, because you can only respond in and behave in your environment as well as the information you're taking in from it. So like the information that you take in from it at the most basic level has to like take place at some given space and time. So the more we understand about that and how all that works, it's kind of, I don't know, it can build up to like greater understandings of how the mind works.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And but there's plenty of people that don't give a crap about how the mind works.
You don't have to.
You care. Like, how
Yeah,
come?
it's interesting. I don't know. It just kind of always got me. Because how do I want to phrase it? It's just interesting that, I mean, everything about being a human and an individual has to do with consciousness and experience. And it's crazy how that, like, how does this little thing in my head like take in data, crunch the numbers, and like put out consciousness? It's just crazy. So to be able to understand that is really sort of my biggest motivating thing. And that took me to space and time.
Do you think it would help you maybe understand your life in a way that you haven't?
Definitely.
Like providing
definitely.
like answers to like the deeper,
Yeah.
your deeper questions.
It really has so far. Because just knowing that, so like within space and time, we can kind of tell that outside of human cognition and human experience and like what I'm seeing, like none of this is real.
Give me an example of that.
Just none of it, because
So if I tap on this, that's not real.
To us it is, but it's not, like beyond our cognition, that's not actually real, because our brains didn't evolve to perceive things as they really are, because that wouldn't have been effective. Like what's really here is just like atoms and molecules and stuff, but like that wasn't advantageous to perceive it as that. It made more sense because we're like solid objects that kind of have to go through space and time, like a solid space and time. It wasn't helpful for us to perceive it as molecules. We need to perceive them as objects, because that's the way we navigate our environment.
Because the object will hit you in the head and kill you.
Exactly.
You need to know what that is.
Exactly.
All
exactly.
Right.
So it's like your brain is taking in that information of like atoms and molecules and stuff, but then like to our conscious experience, like it spits out an image of objects and like physical things, and like how does that go through this and produce that?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen one of those things where it's like a sentence written out, but the letters, it's a mixture of letters and numbers, and it looks like gibberish, but our mind puts it together and then creates the sentences.
Yeah.
And there's a percentage of people that can't read it, but there's a percentage that can.
Yeah.
And I think, from my yogic studies, that's kind of what we do all day long, is we fill in the gaps to create these holes so that we can understand and perceive them. But the parts of the whole are just simply parts.
Right.
And how we put them together is unique unto us.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find that fascinating as well.
It is. It's our brains are just really good at sort of approximating things and piecing things together in a way that makes sense, just because it's efficient to do that.
Right.
So like when you are seeing like the letters and numbers and stuff, it's just that it is your brain just kind of
putting things together and sucking in the information.
Yeah.
There's this idea, we don't see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are, which is a really interesting perspective. I had an employee one time who, she was working behind the front desk, and she was a massage therapist. She was working a little bit at Red Lotus and a lot at some other massage place, and they let her go. And she was hysterically crying behind the desk. I'm like, what are you talking about? Congratulations. You can now work here, earn 100% of the money, and just rebuild your business. And she was like, right.
Yeah.
But she was seeing it from her perspective of being fired and indignation and whatever the experience was. And I was seeing it like, what a great opportunity.
Right. Right.
And it's not, we don't always do that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can be from our, well, this is how my parents saw it, and their parents saw it, and you should never be fired, whatever it is.
Exactly. Same, like, you're never actually just taking in objective reality. It is always going to be sort of like colored by your own perceptions.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Like the way that your individual mind brain works.
Yeah. It's very cool.
It's very cool.
Did you have questions about yourself that you wanted answered? Like, why do I think this way? And why do I behave this way, that you feel this path of study will give you? And then you don't have to be too personal if you don't want to be. I mean, like, you know, or only as personal as you want to be.
I feel like that sort of came after the fact.
Ah.
Sometimes I'll be doing things or like watching someone else do things, and I'll like think to myself like, oh my gosh, their timing ability is going crazy right now, or something like that.
Because it's that good or is that bad?
Yeah, right. Or like, am I doing this only because I have good timing over spatial ability or something like that? So it kind of came after the fact, trying to guess why I do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it interesting sometimes too to see why people chose a certain profession. You know, I'm a highly visual person, and I am kind of ADD, so I have a hard time focusing in. So for me, being a yoga teacher is great. Every day is different. Every class is different. Always interacting with people. It's different every single day.
Yeah.
If I had to sit behind the desk and crunch numbers, I would fail miserably. I'd be sitting there behind the desk like this all day long, bouncing up and down, and then, you know, and messing it up because my mind wanders too much, and it would not be a fit for me.
Yeah. And that could have to do with the way that your brain processes space and time.
Yeah. I don't know that it's inherited, but it might be. My dad was a pharmacist, and he was just behind the counter and filling pills, but he ran the business, and he had employees, and he was always interacting with the public, and he loved it. And that was just his happy place. And even now he's 86, retired, and he still gets up every morning and goes and runs errands and walks the dog and plays tennis and does all these things. And like, he doesn't sit still, you know, other than take his afternoon nap or something. But I guess I'll be the same way. I could see that being very inherited. I just never thought of it, I guess. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And then I wonder what my kid's going to be like.
Right.
Like a watered down version of me.
Right.
Or
like, and you never know like what weird combination of genetics they're going to inherit that like mixed with their environment.
Right.
Influences.
Yeah. Then there's the environment, like social media.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm watching reels or something, I'll watch them and flip through and watch them. My daughter is like zing, 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 zing. I'm like, how did you even like get what the first one was? I don't even know. Like, it was so fast.
Right.
I guess that's why I'm older.
And she probably like definitely got access to all that, and like that's just so she's growing up with that, you know, so her brain is like more ready to take in that information.
So she can do it faster.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm like, oh, what are they saying? And what's the message?
Right.
What's the subtext?
Exactly.
She's looking at something completely different. That's funny. Well, once you've acquired, so your master's is done, almost done, is done.
Yeah.
And then PhD starts.
I'm gonna try to start applying to schools in the fall or next fall. I'm at Oakland right now, and I'm really happy there. So like it's totally fine if I just take time to get more research experience. Got it. Before I go on. And
then what's the end game? Like, what do you teach? Do you just go, well, I got a really cool degree and I'm gonna go have a bunch of babies? Like, what's your
No, I want to be a professor and do research.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's my big goal with it.
And do you have a sense of like research? Would it be something that like, do you have an idea about a topic? You're like, I really want to know about this, you know?
Yeah.
What's your this? Do you have one?
I do have a this right now. I'm sure it'll change broadly. I feel like I'm always going to stay in space and time. But right now, my this is this cognitive perceptual phenomenon called space-time interferences, and that I want to know how and why that happens, and like how that works. So in experiments, they'll do this thing where they'll present two different lines, and like one's like 4 inches long, the other one's like 2 inches long, and they'll both be on the screen for like 2 seconds, like same amount of time. The only difference between them is their lengths, and subjects will always report that the longer line lasted longer on the screen. So like somehow taking in more space makes them perceive more time.
So they're the same width. Just one's a little bit longer.
Yeah, and they're like same duration on the screen, 2 seconds, but like people feel like the longer one lasted more time too.
That's interesting.
And then so like that's at like the most basic level, but then in experience, when you'd see that is like if you're in a high intensity situation, it can feel like it lasted like 30 minutes, but then
Right.
you'll find out it was like 2 seconds.
Right. Like dreams.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're taking in so much spatial information, that time seems to last longer.
Do you think that this research could help like people with PTSD because of the way certain incidents imprint upon the brain?
Yeah,
That maybe there's a way to undo some of that imprint and get them unstuck.
yeah, getting I don't know much about real life applications of space and time, but PTSD has to do with memory encoding and like something to do with like memory, and memory has everything to do with space and time.
Right.
So absolutely learning more about space and time and how at the most basic levels the brain processes space and time will definitely add up to getting a better understanding of memory, which would then get a better understanding of PTSD.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you'd be able to help people.
Yeah.
I mean, all the study's great, but then it's like, what's the practical application? Is it simply theoretical, or is it like, oh, well, in real life, we might be able to help somebody with blah, blah, blah. I mean, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, my area, I don't know if it'll directly help, but understanding at what's happening at the lower level, people at higher levels can use.
Sure.
So
it's like a building block or a foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
Which would be still very useful.
Yeah, it is very useful. It's just like looking at direct application of it, a little harder to.
Well, yeah, I know. Like, look at these 2 lines.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel? Tell me about your childhood. Maybe not really direct, but some cool stuff. I think it's great. Tell me about, have you, like in the field of study, you read a book or had a moment and you're like, this answers a question about me. Like, oh yeah, this is why I do this thing. Do you have any like ahas?
Kind of ish.
Yeah.
It's because I don't know. I guess because of my specific areas, it is still stuff that's just like, oh, it's my timing ability and my working memory must be like doing something to make me be able to do this. Or like just a lot of just wondering what's happening in the brain to like produce consciousness, and then like beyond consciousness, what is there? Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's very interesting stuff. Like, as a yoga teacher, I lead retreats, I teach yoga classes, I do teacher trainings, and run the studio. And I guess I went into yoga trying to answer questions I had, fix problems, dealing with general depression or just dissatisfaction with life and wanting sort of a deeper connection to myself and to other people and so forth. And everything I found out about myself happened by accident, almost. Not like, oh, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to meditate right now, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to come up with this answer. It didn't happen that way. It would be like I was in a silent retreat and it was no eye contact, no physical contact, no verbal contact. And I opened the door for the people behind me going down a hallway. And then I looked up for the thank you, which would be sort of just knee jerk. And in that moment, I was like, well, why did I do that? I know what the rules are. Did I open the door to be nice? Because these are strong, capable people.
Yeah.
Or did I open the door for the thank you? I was like, I did it for the thank you. Oh, I do a lot of that, for the accolade. And so that was a huge, like, humbling experience and an awakening experience. Had I not been on the retreat and had I not been in silence, that wouldn't have happened like that, I don't think. And, but because I was in some sort of practice, the experience happened. One time I was taking a yoga class, and I always took it with this one teacher, and I was in this one pose, and in this one pose, the teacher always came up and gave me a physical adjustment. It was sort of like our moment in time. And one day I'm in the pose, and the teacher went and gave the adjustment to somebody else. I was like, dude, that's my adjustment. What the hell? And I realized, you know what? I don't think I'm coming to this class for me. I'm coming for him. I'm coming for his approval. I'm coming for his connection. I'm coming for his, acknowledgement. And so I stopped going to that class for a while until I could go there with a level of not needing something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it made me realize, well, I do that a lot in life. There was another moment where when I was teaching at the end of class, I was a new teacher at the time, we say namaste, and then I would look up for the people's reaction. I was like, why am I looking up? Like, am I only doing this, or is part of why I'm doing this for what's coming at me?
Right.
So then I stopped looking up. I just will hold the pose until people started moving around, and I didn't make eye contact with people for a while until I could get to a space where I was giving this for the sake of giving it, not for the sake of receiving. And there was a lot of like those kinds of ahas over the years that woke me up to myself, how I was maneuvering in life and how I was using this job to do that. But then how much sweeter the job was when I wasn't doing that. Right. That evolution. And that's been a really interesting pathway of self-exploration and growth. But a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to go to yoga and I'm going to get enlightened, or I'm going to meditate and I'm going to do this. And it's going to just like that, it's going to happen. And I've been doing this for 20 years. It's 2023 now. I started in 2021, so 22 years. And 2001. And it doesn't happen fast.
Right.
And I think people think that, like, oh, I've been doing yoga for what, a week now, and come on, where's my payoff?
Yeah,
it doesn't happen like that.
It is so every time I think about this, I go through this thing every few months where I'm waiting for the next phase of changes, or when am I going to feel the next thing or whatever. And it's always when I stop paying attention and stop interrogating myself and looking for it, that I realize, oh my gosh, here it is.
Isn't that an interesting lesson?
Yeah.
Right. It's so much not about the doer doing yoga. It's the experience of being while the doing is going on.
Right.
And that it's so hard to kind of explain that.
Yeah.
Like, what happened to you? Like, what were some of your experiences?
The first big one was at your yoga retreat. That whole weekend was nuts.
In a good way. It was a great retreat.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm about to explain why it's incredible. Man, it's been a minute since I've thought about it and reflected on it, but one of the first times it really sort of hit me that, oh man, it's such a big thing. It's hard to break it down and explain it, but I really for the first time felt like myself, and I was the experiencer, and I was I was just so in my body and comfortable and present and here. And I'd never felt that before ever. And so it was really, from that point on, it's been sort of life-changing. It really changed the way I navigate life and go about myself as a person and the things that I do. But and it happened at the retreat. So the first night was incredible, wonderful, amazing. And then the next morning, we did the yoga class in the morning, and your meditation made me cry. And so I just felt such a relief, and I felt so much lighter and freer that when I then took a super long walk in the woods, and I was sitting there, and it just sort of hit me oh my God, I'm here. Hey, it's me and I'm here. And it was just such a feeling of relief. And I it happened entirely on accident when I wasn't waiting for like, when am I gonna feel good?
Sure.
Like, sure, am I happy yet? Like that relentless, like, interrogating yourself like inwards. It was amazing.
Do
Yeah.
you ever think that, oh my gosh, I've always been here. I just wasn't awake to it.
Yeah. And so now that I have like felt myself as being here,
Mhm.
it's so much easier to come back to it. I can like pause and be like, I'm still here. It's me, I'm here. I know what this feels like. I can think back to it and bring myself present again.
And how did you feel before that?
Ah, frazzled, really stressed out. This weird sort of detached feeling of like, I don't know, just like there's Haylee the experiencer and like Haylee the doer, and I like really felt that detachment. And like everything I did, there was this sort of like, I just wasn't here for it.
Yeah. Like just going through the motions.
Yeah, and that going through the motions, but also with like sort of third person, like really monitoring everything I did. And yeah, so that's what, when I get sort of detached from the present, that's what it feels like.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a cool thing to come back to that though.
Yeah, I agree. So it's, yeah.
And I say back to it because I suppose as little kids, we're probably just so connected to that we're in the moment. We have no awareness of, deadlines and obligations or whatever. Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And is there anything you do to kind of, because I've gotten to that point a number of times in my life, but then you get back into the routine and you kind of fade away from it.
Right.
What do you do to stay with it or to come back to it? Or you just, it's on there and you're just, no, you're like, you're good. Bob's your uncle, you're all set.
I try to meditate every day. I usually meditate in the morning and I go for really, really excessively long walks. And I feel like that always sort of helps me bring me back to it. But yoga class, definitely. I don't know. Yeah, just things like that. What do you do? What
do I do? Me, it's getting into nature. If I can get out into the woods, a lot of times I'll go to northern Michigan and hike on the North Country Scenic Trail, and just a backpack on my back and a day pack with water and food and extra clothes in case it rains or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm tuned in. No dog, the phone on airplane mode, and just I'm tuned in. That's my thing. But I can't get to it that often, just the nature of this of running the studio. So that's important to me. I wish it wasn't 3 hours drive to get there or to get to a place like that, but it's just because out there, there's no cars, there's no there's almost no cell phone reception. Most times when I hike, I might run into one person in a 4-hour window, and
that's not bad.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
If I run into anybody at all, I mean, that's just my favorite thing. So, I mean, I would love to do it more often. It's a 3-hour drive. You know?
It's amazing what silence and being alone with yourself can really do for you. Yeah. It
is. In nature for me, so people think yoga is just like, Om Shanti Shanti and, doing all these crazy, and that's asana, that's postures. But yoga, I think to me is also knowing, you've achieved yoga when you know what to pick up and what to set down, says my teacher, Lama Marut. And sometimes picking up is going for a walk in the woods. Sometimes it's spending time on the mat. Sometimes it's meditating. And there's a million ways to meditate. Walking in the woods is a moving meditation if your phone's not on and you don't have your earbuds in. So that gets me back there. When you meditate though, what do you do? What's your?
So I use Sam Harris has a waking up app, and so I usually use that, and it's just guided meditations.
Those are great.
Yeah, I really like them.
Those are great. Sam Harris, the actor?
No, he writes on free will and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deep stuff. Way down the rabbit hole. Very cool. Okay, I'll have to check it out. Yeah, people ask me all the time, like, what's the best one? The one you're going to listen to.
Yeah.
Well, which one's that? Well, I don't know.
Right.
For years, I was trying to create like a morning routine for myself. And I would always meditate and do some asana in the morning for years and years and years. And then I just kind of got stale. And I was like, all right, I need a new routine. And so when I get up every morning now, I have my cup of tea, take care of the animals. I do 80 jumping jacks, 50 push-ups, 50 squats, 5 sun salutations, and then a 6-minute ice bath. And I'm good.
Mhm.
When that's over, I am ready to just jump into my day.
I bet.
And some days it's, the water temp's about 50. Some days it feels like it's 30. Some days it feels like it's 60. And some days I can barely move my body. And some days it's like, this was so easy, I'm going to add on some squats and push-ups. But for now, that's my raft. And when I get to the other side of this, I'll set the raft down and I'll do something else.
Yeah.
People think they got to be stuck in the same thing. You don't.
No, you have to do what's going to be good and effective for you.
Yeah, you can totally change it up and it's still okay.
Mhm.
Now, if you change it up after just doing something for a week, that's not okay.
Right.
Like they really, if you're going to meditate, people say, well, what should I meditate on? What should I do? I say, well, I've got a whole toolbox of meditations I can teach you. But you have to do it, 5 days a week
Mhm.
for a month, 2 months. And at the end of that, then tell me what it's like. But don't go, well, I'm bored. Oh, what day is it? 3. Well, you haven't done it enough.
Right.
Right. You haven't really, because when you do it, when you don't want to, and when you're distracted or when you didn't prepare yourself, like, I'm going to have a pint of ice cream before I go to bed. And then you can't sleep all night. And the next morning you feel like crap. You're not going to meditate well.
Right. Exactly.
Or work out well or do whatever well. And it's not just the practice, it's all the prep work you do for the practice so that it bears fruit.
Mhm.
And I think people just don't get that.
Yeah, the practice isn't an isolated event. It's like situated within your broader living.
It's one of the building blocks of your living.
Yeah.
And it's just one more thing that you do.
Mhm.
And you have to be like a mule. People are like, well, what's the best yoga pose or best class? The one you're going to show up to.
Mhm.
Just keep showing up. And the thing is that you start to learn to show up for yourself. That's the hardest lesson, I think, is like, oh, I'm showing up for myself so I can be of better service to others.
Yeah.
Like that combination, I think, is a good approach.
Yeah, it's so hard to do anything for yourself. It feels like it has to be some sort of external reason.
Yeah.
Or something.
Like I'll do, for my kid, I'll, lose an arm, I'll give blood, donate a kidney. But, for myself,
right.
I'm too busy for
that. So it's really powerful to have something for yourself that you do.
And like, it's powerful to get to the point where it's for yourself and you like it.
Yeah.
Where you've evolved to that level of, this is really good for me and I'm doing this no matter what. And
because it's not just feeling selfish that you're doing something. It's like feeling selfish and being okay with it.
It's like being self-full.
Yeah, self-full.
Great made up word. Yeah. But then you feel like, all right, I'm doing something good.
Yeah.
Like today I was like, I know I want to be really sharp for this podcast. So I got up a little early and I did some extra workout and I did the ice bath and I did all the prep work so that when it's time to deliver, hopefully I'm
exactly
relevant and making some sense. I don't know.
I think you're relevant and making sense in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I don't know. I didn't I should have prepared questions. I don't know. I feel like I should hear about your life story, unless you want that to be a separate episode.
No. I mean, ask whatever you want to ask.
Jeez. Well, you kind of went into how yoga has taught you more things about yourself, but do you have more to say about that?
Sure.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, prior to being a yoga teacher, I was a real estate agent, and I did that for about 10 years, and I was really successful and rated as one of the top producing real estate agents in the state of Michigan, near the end of my career. Takes a while to build up, and was completely miserable. You get into things sometimes inner child work. You ever heard of that?
Kind
of. So I always wanted my father's approval. I felt like I
Okay.
never got it.
Yeah.
So I went into a business that could be very lucrative financially. That's how he judges things. So I wanted him to judge me kindly. And I got into real estate. And at one point, I think I was 29 years old. And I said to my dad, hey, by the time I said I had a goal that by the time I was 30, I wanted to earn $100,000 a year. And so I said, I'm 29 and I hit my mark. And he said, well, is that gross or is that net? I was like,
Oh, God.
it was gross, but to me, I was like, before taxes, that's what I earned.
Yeah.
I was pretty proud of myself.
Yeah.
And I realized, I got to do this for me, not for his approval, because I don't think I'm ever going to get it. There's never going to be enough money. So I changed my tack. I used to be like, hey, I'm Brian, registered Century 21. When do you plan on moving? Like everybody was a future paycheck. And I was really into it. And then I softened and said, how many people this year can I help with their real estate? And sometimes I would help people not buy a house because it made no sense financially. Even though they wanted it, they'd be broke. And I'm like, think about this. Is this really how you want to live?
Mhm.
And anyway, I did it for about 10 years, just really burned out. I had a really good real estate guru who was good at teaching you how to be productive, but he didn't teach you how to rest and didn't teach you how to turn it off. And I never turned it off. I mean, I was working 7 days a week. Just
That's not good.
wasn't good.
Yeah.
So somebody took me to a yoga class just for stress relief, and I loved it. And I started practicing 2-3 days a week. And at the time I was like weightlifting and kickboxing and getting my nose broken and doing, just dumb stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but it didn't really get underneath.
Mhm.
And yoga really did. I mean, there were many times on the mat I found myself crying and not even knowing why. So I took a teacher training program just to see, would I like it? Would it, just to learn more. I was like, I'm never going to be able to replace my income. So it's not really an option. But I started teaching part-time and I loved it.
Yeah.
So one dark, dreary day in a therapist's couch, they said to me, well, Brian, if you had 6 months left to live, you want to teach yoga or do you want to sell another house? I said, teach yoga. And so she said, well, pick a date. I said, August 17th or something like that. She said, okay, that's the date. And it was like January at the time. That's the date that you're going to no longer be selling real estate. And like, it hit me like a ton of bricks, like, oh shit, what am I going to do? August 17th came and I gave my business to my assistant. I said, pay me referral fees for 1 year and then the business is yours. All the referrals are yours after that. And whatever business. And I started teaching yoga full time. And at some point in 2003, I bought a small yoga studio and built it, grew it, moved it, changed the name. And now in 2023, we are at Red Lotus Yoga. And I've been doing this for 20 years now. And I wouldn't change it. I would not change any of it, even through COVID and all the challenges. And, I'm married, I have a daughter, we're happy, we have a good life.
Mhm.
It's a good business and we serve the community and we have enough to live our lives modestly and
Yeah.
we're good.
Yeah, it's a wonderful business. Red Lotus is so special. And you did that.
I did that. Kate and I did that.
Yeah, Kate, and you did
My wife
that.
has a lot you don't see her as much. She's behind the scenes, but
She does so much.
she does so much behind the scenes that she gets a ton of credit. If you ever watch this, honey, I mentioned you because it's not all me by any means.
No, she's wonderful.
I'm just the face and the goofy guy that makes a lot of noise. She, on the other hand, is that calm, cool, stabilizing feminine force, whereas I'm kind of like the force. So yeah, that's kind of my origin story for this. And it's interesting too, because people say, like I'll hire people your age and younger, and they're all stressed out about, well, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I'm like, you don't need to know.
Right.
I had a college degree. I sold office supplies, then memberships at a video dating service when there used to be VHS videos. And then I worked in retail for a year. And then I was a realtor and now I'm doing this. I couldn't have predicted this and I'm fine.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And people think they have to know. You don't have to know.
No.
It's going to come to you one way or the other, So for all you, if anybody's listening out there going, well, what am I supposed to be doing for the rest of my life?
You don't have to know.
I don't even know what I'm going to do the rest of my life. One day there'll be another person here, and maybe I'll do podcasts. So press the like button, subscribe. Yeah, but that's kind of how I got here. And I even on like a dark day, and even on I'm tired, and I've taught a lot of classes. When I go into the room, like everything just turns on, and I'm present, and I'm in the moment, and I still love my life. So
that's great.
I think so too.
That's great.
I think so too. Yeah. What else? What else? I don't have anything else.
I don't know if I do either.
You feel done?
Sure.
All right, well, then we're done.
Okay.
Well, thanks for being the first interviewee.
It's an honor.
Yeah.
It's an honor.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.